Hi, I'm Corey, and today is day 20 of the 100-day project in my version, which is 6 by 6 and 6. Today's project is going to be an ephemera holder, an accordion style file, just a place to keep some of your little bits for any paper crafter. I'm using heritage style paper or older style paper, but you can use it for anything, any paper line that you have. And the concept, again, is to take your 6 by 6 paper pads and do a variety of different projects with them. All right, this is my third take on this. I talked way too much and it was way too long, so I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly. The project itself is pretty simple. The talking is what takes a long time, so bear with me on that. This was a smaller version of the same thing, and we're going to be making the one that's this size. It's called an accordion or concertina. A lot of people have them. I'm sure there's multiple videos out there. This is just my take using the 6 by 6 paper and some things that I found are tips that I learned as I was creating these that'll hopefully help you avoid some of the mistakes I made. Your final size is 5 3/4 by 4, which is approximately 14.6 by 10.2 centimeters. And you'll need 6 sheets of pattern paper. One of the reasons I show a picture of what we're using is some of my viewers don't speak English as their primary language, so by showing the products too, if I'm using a word they're not familiar with, they can at least see. So you're going to need wet glue. A circle punch is not mandatory, but I highly recommend it. You are going to need your 6 sheets of 6 sheets of 6 by 6 paper. I really recommend heavier weight cardstock for this because this is kind of a sturdy item. This isn't the best project for your single-sided. Well, actually, single-sided is fine as long as it's cardstock. You will need a ruler and a bone folder, a pen, a pair of scissors. I am going to use ribbon for this particular one. If you're wanting a different type of closure system, if you're wanting this double loop type of closure system, or if you're wanting to use Velcro tab, you can certainly do that. But for this project, I'm going to use ribbon. So you have some options there. And clamps, binder clips. I really like these for holding the glue in place. So I recommend them. You can use double-sided tape for this. My only objection to this is if I don't line it up perfectly when I put it together, it's really difficult to move. With the liquid glue, which gives me just as strong of a hold, I have a little bit of wiggle room, which is why I prefer this. But if you like double-sided tape, go for it. All right, you will also need a scoreboard on this or some kind of a scoring system. You can use a ruler and a pencil if you like, but a scoring system is super important. Okay, I wrote down my directions simply because there's a lot of fiddly little steps and I don't want to forget something that's kind of important. So you've got 6 sheets of paper, and the very first thing you're going to do is decide which of the 6 sheets. Now this is a great project if you've got some patterns that you may not really love or may not be your favorite or something you don't use so much. It's going to be inside, so most of it's not going to show. So choose 2 pieces that you like. What I call this the top and back, because this is the top or the fold over and the back. And then this one is the front and bottom, because this is the bottom section and the front section. So top, back, front, bottom. Choose 2 sheets of 6 by 6 paper that you want to be your top and your back and your front and your bottom. And I'm going to use these 2, and I'm going to put them off to the side. Some people, when they build these, they kind of do it all the way through, and I do it in 2 steps. I do the inside, and then I do the outside, and then I put the inside and outside together. I've had better luck with that. It gets a little bit more forgiving. So your first step after you've chosen your top and your front and your back, your top and bottom, you are going to take these 4 sheets. I've already done this one. I put it together already simply because there was no need to show you the exact same thing twice. So your 4 sheets, you are going to score them. You are going to score them at 5 5/8, which is 14.5 centimeters. So all 4 sheets are going to get scored. Let's see, do I want it like this or do I want it like this? I don't know, it doesn't really matter because these are going to be on the inside. So you're going to score it at 5 5/8. So all 4. Let's pretend this was 4. Like I said, I already did this one. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. 5 5/8. Okay. And then you are going to fold this over on your score line. on both of those. And again, if this were the 4 that I was really doing, I'd score all 4. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut just a little triangle. At that, where I've got that fold, I'm going to cut just a little triangle off all of those corners. So on all 4 sheets, you would cut off that little divot. Just because it gives you a nicer finished product. Your edges look a little sharper. That's my only reason. Then you're going to glue. And the way you glue these together is you've got your hinge or your flap, and you want that to be on the inside. And what I mean by that is, let's see, one of these, I glued it on the outside. Okay, you can see here. On here, I glued it on the outside, and it's just not as smooth of a crease. There's one more. It's not just as, here we go. It's hard to see because it's black, but it just gives you a more finished edge. Here you go. I didn't take the notch off that one so you can see. It kind of gives it, when you take that triangle off, you don't have to worry about them matching up perfectly, and it also just gives you a little bit smoother edge. When you open this, because you want it to accordion, if you've got the flap or hinge on the outside, you can see it. Whereas if you've got it inside, you can't see it. It just gives you a nicer finished product. All right, so I've got both of these, my 2 sheets, and then the second thing with my 2 sheets, same exact idea. And I want the hinge to go on the inside, or the flap to go on the inside, and one of them on each side. So over here and over here. So basically, you're going to glue it like this with your flap on the right and a flap on the left, and you're going to glue it together. I glue these one at a time because, like I said, it gives me a little bit more wiggle room. If I glue them both at once, I just have less space to move things around if I don't line it up perfectly. So I'm going to put glue. I'm going to use the flat side. I'm going to make sure that my hinge is on the inside. I'm going to line these up. Make sure they're even. If a little glue comes out, it's no big deal. This dries clear. And then I am going to clamp these edges together. And then I'm going to turn it around and do the exact same thing on the other side. My hinge, I'm going to put glue just on my hinge flap, and I'm going to glue it down, and I'm going to clamp it. Okay? And I'm going to do that for all 4 of my pieces. 2 pieces go together, and then 2 pieces to go together, and that gives you your 4 pockets on the inside. Okay. Glue it down and clamp it together. So I clamp it simply because you want these hinges to be tight and you want these hinges to be strong, because that's the base of your accordion. And however much ephemera or stuff you put inside your pockets, you want these to be sturdy. So I would be, while this one is drying, I'd put it aside and do the same thing for the next one. Glue, clamp. And you can see here what it does. It gives you at the end, maybe you can see it, is it gives you a tube. So I've got my hinges here and here, and now I've got a tube. Okay? And so once both of these pieces are done, I'm going to grab my scoreboard, and at 3 inches, which is about 7.6 centimeters, halfway, I want the open pieces on the sides. I want to score at the fold, okay, at the folded piece, the closed piece. So I'm going to score, and then I'm going to fold it back on itself, because the whole Valley Ridge business, Valley Mountain, whatever it is, and fold that in half. And you don't have to use a scoreboard, but it's a lot easier because you've got 4 layers essentially of cardstock here that you're trying to fold down. Now you're going to notice, oh my gosh, it buckles. You want it to buckle because that gives you your cool accordion effect. And this one's a little bit looser. So that gives you you want it to buckle a little bit because you want it to be able to open up and stretch. So I've got the first one scored. I'm going to take my clamps off and score the second one. And again, I want my fold line at the top. I'm going to score it halfway. Oops, sorry about that. That would be your scoreboard going off to the side. I apologize. Seems I do that a lot in these videos. Okay, so there's my score line, and I'm going to fold it now and crease it. Okay, and this is essentially the inside of your folder. You don't have to do this next step. It's not mandatory. I just like it. I take divots or notches out of the pockets, simply because when I put my hands in to get whatever's in there out, it's less harsh on your cuticles. So I like it. I do it. You don't have to. And the way I do it is, these are just shy of 6 inches, remember, because we've got that piece that we scored. So I find the center, and not, you can eyeball it, but I roughly find the center and make a mark. You almost can't even see the mark on there. And I'll take my circle punch. You can use a template and cut this if you want. And I take about 1/4 of the circle width divot out. You can do a little bit more if you want it deeper, but don't do too much because you'll defeat the purpose of making your pockets. So about 1/4 of the total. And I punch it out. Now, I could line all of these up and try to punch through them, but that's a lot of thickness as a cardstock to go through at once. So what I do is I punch the first 2 sections, or the first 2 pieces, because they're laying next to each other. And then I'll use my pen to make a mark on the piece underneath it to take out that divot. That way I know when I glue these together, my divots are going to line up. Okay, so I've got those 2. And then I take my second section and I line it up with my first section. I make sure they're nice and even. And I use those divots as my guideline to take out my next divot. And I'm going to come in here, line it up, and cut it. And I'm going to do the same thing the last time. So I do that a total of 4 times for each of the pieces. And last one. All right. So that's all the divots taken out. Now what I want to do is glue my pieces together. If these aren't perfectly lined, or if I'm not happy with the way they match, this is where I can come in and trim them. But these look pretty darn good. So I tend to do this in 3 steps, simply because I find that I get a better result. And this is one of those learn from my mistakes things. When I was doing a couple of these samples, I put the glue, or the double-sided tape, too far out. So you want this to accordion. You want it to open up. And if you put the glue too far out toward the edge, it doesn't open up the way you want it to open up. This is one of my earlier ones, and you can see this opens. It works pretty darn well, but I only used about maybe 1/2 inch or so in here between the tape and the glue between one pocket and the next. And to get a really good accordion, you want a little bit more. Look how wide that opens. And it's nice and sturdy and strong, but it opens and gives me a lot more flexibility in how much I put inside and what I put inside. So my rule of thumb is I leave about 1 inch. When I'm gluing these pieces together, I leave about 1 inch on each edge. I do the same thing at the bottom. I use about 1/2 inch or so, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, because I'm going to make a score or a pleat here at the bottom so that I can do that same thing. I want it to expand. I want it to be able to open up. So before I glue, now if I were going to ink, this is where I would ink, simply because it's easier. I take the first piece and the second piece and I glue these together first. And the reason I do that is it's just a little easier to line them up and make sure they're perfectly lined up. So when I glue this, when I put this glue on, I make sure that I've got about, I want no glue here. Oops, let me move that down, sorry. I want no glue here, and I want no glue here. I want to leave that for the stretchability, but I want to make sure this has got a significant amount of glue because I want it to touch and be tight with the one next to it. So I don't measure it, but it's about. I use that as my guideline. I'm going to come in, and I don't go all the way down to the, let's see if you can see that. I don't go all the way down to the bottom crease because I want a little bit of give in there too. So here's my outline. About 1 inch on each side, about 1 inch on each side roughly, and I do want the glue to come up towards the top. And then I'm going to fill it in because I want this to hold. I'm going to fill that in. And that's about the amount of glue I'm going to use. And now I am going to put these pieces together. I'm going to come in and line them up. And so you can see I've got some overlap here. I don't want those pockets. I want the sections to glue together, but I don't want the pockets to be glued together. So I'll just wipe those down. Now I'm going to clamp it or adhere it in some way because I want those to dry. I want those to be nice and tight. So I'm going to press. I want those to be a good adherent. Obviously, I'm going to give it a little more time if I'm doing this not in front of the camera, but for the sake of speed in the camera. So I've got my center sections put together, and I've got my first set of pockets. Now these don't line up perfectly, as you can see here, so I can come in with my punch and trim that, or I can take my scissors and trim it because I want them to be a little bit closer. I had the other sides lined up. Okay, so there we go. And this is, I would have had these inked because I don't care for the white center, but for the sake of speed. So I'm gonna let this dry. I want this to dry. I can't emphasize enough. You want this to dry. And that is your center pocket. You've adhered the two pieces together. And you're gonna do the same thing on this piece to make your third pocket. Okay. And then the same thing right here. So you're gonna glue 2 more times. Once on the right of where you just glued and once on the left. And that's you're gonna fold these up and that's gonna make your pockets. And I'm gonna glue about the same amount. I'm going to glue around, let's see, am I in frame? I'm gonna glue around the edge of the opening, and I'm going to go out to about 1 inch, and I'm not gonna go all the way to the bottom. Maybe 1/2 inch or so, 1/4 of an inch from the bottom. And I'm gonna fill that in with glue. I want it to hold, so I'm not, I don't only use crazy amounts of glue, but I want to use enough to make sure it holds. So glue, and then line it up and hold it. And then the same thing back here. See, if I've got some glue, this is where I come in and wipe it down. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the back of that center pocket. Okay, so glue 3 different sections. And then this is where I'm going to push that down. Again, I'm going to come in and make sure I don't have so much over the top that they glue the mouths together. I just want them to glue like that. Okay, so then I'm going to come in and clamp this down. I'm going to use this simply because I want to make sure that this is nice and tight and it glues real well, but you can use just your standard clamps. I'm going to clamp that down. I want that glue to be dry before I move on to putting the whole piece together, and I want to make sure it's clamped. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to put it aside. Now I'm going to come in with my top and bottom, my front and back. I'm going to do the top of the front first. So the top of the front. So I call it top and back. So here's your top and your back and your front and your bottom. This is going to be underneath. And then that's the part you're going to see when you're looking at your ephemera folder. On the inside you get a little bit of a glimpse, but when you start putting your ephemera in there and such, you don't really see that so much, or you don't notice it quite as much. So that's why you chose your papers based on what you like. So the front bottom piece, the front bottom, which is this one right here, I'm going to put that down first, and I decided I wanted this one for that. I'm going to put that down first, and I'm going to score at 3/8 of an inch and 3 1/4 of an inch. Because, remember, these pockets are 3 inches tall because we had 6 inches and we folded them in half. I like a little bit of a lip or a ledge right here between the pocket and then this. It just makes it easier to get into and out of, and it makes it easier to fold. So I leave about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch right there, which is why I'm scoring this at 3 1/8 inch, so just over half, and again at 3 1/4 inch. So I'm not giving, whoops, make sure I got that in the right spot, 3 1/8 inch and 3 1/4 inch. Now I don't have a big pleat on the bottom, but that's enough to make it so that my pocket opens nicely. And it's just about a quarter of an inch on the pleat. And that's what this does. This gives you that pleat. I'm going to fold it over, and I'm going to fold it over on the second score line. And now I have the front and bottom of my pocket. And I didn't crease these super tight. You certainly can. But it's going to end up looking like this. You're going to have, this is going to be the back, this is going to be the front which is this piece right here. So that's your front. Okay. So I'm going to put that aside and then take my front cover, or my the top and the back. This is the next piece I'm going to score. And you want to put face side down. So I want this section to show. So I'm going to put it down. But I need to make sure, if I've got a directional paper, I want the writing to be in the correct direction. So I want this writing to be face side down and facing to the right side of my scoreboard. So I want this to be, well, I guess it doesn't really matter on this one. Yeah, this would be all upside down. So I want this piece to be to the right of my scoreboard and down. And I am going to score this several times. And the reason I'm going to score it several times is I like what I call a rolling top. As I expand and put more and more things in here, if I have just a straight crease, it kind of limits how much I can put in and how much it'll give. But if I do a bunch of score lines here, it allows my top to roll. And as it expands, I have more flexibility in my top. So I do several creases right there. All of these, I did it the same way, the rolling top, regardless of the closure. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility. This one I did not. See, this is more like a matchbook style. It's just a simple single crease. I just find it works better when I let it roll. So I am going to start at 4 inches, which is 10.2 centimeters, and I'm going to score it every little score line between 4 and 4.5, which is 11.4. So I'm going to score at each one of these creases. So that gives me a total of 5 creases, and that gives me that rolling top that I want. Okay, and I'm going to come in and fold them down at those creases. I don't need to have super sharp creases, but again, that gives me my whole rolling effect that I want. Okay, so now my front and my back are done. All what I'm going to do next is glue these two pieces together. And that creates the outer shell of my accordion folder. I am going to put a piece of ribbon down here because I'm going to use a ribbon closure. If you're not using a ribbon closure, if you want a closure along these lines or Velcro, you don't need to do this step. But I wanted to show it for folks who like the ribbon closure. And again, the ribbon closure just gives you a little bit of flexibility in how much. So I've got a piece of sari silk here. You can use anything, any kind of ribbon. And I don't want to fold it exactly in half because when I fold it around, the back is going to come up and around. So I want the back piece a little longer and then they'll tie right here. So the front piece will be shorter, the back piece will be a little bit longer. So front piece, and then I'm going to lay it like this. And I'm going to lay it down on the inside, or the back and the top of my paper. This front pocket I'm just going to put aside for now. I'm going to lay this down right here, and you can see that the back piece is a little bit longer than the front piece. And you can glue that for sure. You can sew it if you were wanting to sew it. I am just going to put a little bit of glue, and then I'm going to put some double-sided tape on top of it to make sure that it holds in place. And I'm not measuring it, but it's roughly in the center. I just kind of eyeballed that, just like so. I'm going to push down, and then I'm going to take a piece of that double-sided tape and hold it. Normally I would sew this, but for the sake of ease here, I'm just going to take a piece of double-sided tape and make sure that I've got that down nice and tight. All right, now I'm going to glue this bottom front to the top back. So bottom and front to the top and back. I'm going to basically just put these two pieces together. That's it. And I line them up just like I did before. Again, you can use double-sided tape here, but I like the wet glue. And I'm going to line them up just like that. And that will be the outside of my envelope. Okay, there went that. I'm going to put glue on this. Now you can cut this down. I just leave it because it gives a little bit of extra stability. And you can go mostly to the edges on this because you're wanting to adhere the front to the back pretty tightly. And then fill it in with glue. And I'm going to line it up and make sure that they're straight and that they They both touch the bottom. Okay, and now, oh, you can see there I didn't line it up. That's the nice thing about wet glue. It gives you a little bit of flexibility to move it. Okay, and it's lining up at the bottom. It's lining up on the back. And now these clamps, I'm just going to come in and clamp this because again, this is my base. I want it to dry nice and tight, and I want to make sure that it's going to be sturdy. Okay, so now I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to come in and unclamp my front section. And here is the inside, okay? You can see there I got a little bit of glue on that pocket. It comes off, a little bit of glue. I would ink these because I don't like the white edges. You don't have to do it, but I like the way it looks. And so this is my accordion fold. You can see I've got a little bit of room at the bottom and I've got lots of room at the sides. So when I put this in, it's going to accordion nicely. All that's left to do, I'll unclamp these. Make sure I've got my bottom on my bottom. Now, if you were going to do this type of closure, this is when you would punch your holes before you put this piece inside. But because we did a ribbon closure, we obviously don't need to use that. If you were doing a Velcro closure, you don't have to worry about that. You can do it at the very end. All right. I like a round corner on these, but you certainly don't have to. You can leave them square. And so I'm going to come in and round the corners now while it's not as bulky. And then you just put the front to the back. That's it. I glue one piece at a time rather than gluing them both at once. I generally glue this of the inside. I'll glue this section to the bottom front first. And you can see in there is your little bit of a lip. It's not glued together. But you can see there's just a little bit of a lip, a little bit of an overlap. Just gives you a little more stability. Anyway, I'm going to glue that piece. And then I will glue the back piece. And I can go a little bit farther out on this. Like you can see, I didn't stay right in there because I don't need this to be quite as giving as the inside accordion plates. I don't want to go all the way to the edge because I don't want glue seeping out. But I can be a little bit more generous on the outside edges where I'm going to glue it. Okay, so glue. And then I'm going to center it. Put the bottom on the ground so that I know it's where I want it centered. And I'm going to push these pieces together. Okay. Push them down. See? It's got a, because it's 6 inches, I've got a, whoops, I didn't do that straight, did I? Got a little bit of extra on each side. Again, look, see? I didn't put it exactly where I wanted it. So now, because I've used wet glue, I have a little bit more freedom to move things around. Okay. So, glue those in place. So that's my front. I'm going to do the exact same thing in the back. I'm going to put glue on this back pocket and glue it to the back of my page. Okay, lots of glue. And again, I want this to be able to give a little bit, so when I'm putting it in here, I don't put it in super tight. I do want it to be straight, so I'm going to make sure it's straight and lined up because I've got that accordion plate at the bottom. All right, that fold or plate at the bottom. I'm going to come in and I'm going to take my clamps. Maybe I'm going to take my clamps. And I'm going to make sure that the front is adhered to the back. And I will let that dry for just a moment. And that is pretty much all there is to it. And I'll show you here at the end. 30 minutes? Oh, I almost made 30 minutes. That's pretty good. I knew there was no way this one was going to be 6 minutes simply because there's so much talking. But this is way better than the first couple times I did it. All right. So, tips. Don't put your glue out too far on the side. I'm going to come tomorrow and show you. Now, I find I like to put inserts inside these pockets simply because a lot of times our ephemera is small. And so I think what I might do, I'm going to do a different ephemera folder, maybe even 2 different ephemera folders in the next couple days. But I like to be able to take, like these are just vellum pouches, and put them in. so that I can easily get out my small bits. If I wanted to put 2 of these in here, I could. So it gives me a little bit more option and a little bit more flexibility so that when I'm digging through, I don't have to kind of like look in the pockets and the corners. That's an option. If you're using larger ephemera, you certainly don't need to do that. And that is our ephemera folder. You just take it around, wrap it around here, tie the front closed, and there's ephemera folder and holder in one. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day.